Property Investing Insights, your authority on all things property investing, finance and wealth creation with Right Property Group.
G'day, how you going? Welcome to Property Investing Insights. I'm Phil Tarrant, your co-host, joining the studio with Victor and Reshmi Kumar, directors over at the Right Property Group. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How's it going?
Good to be back.
Director, what's your actual official title, Reshmi? I know
Boss.
the boss.
The boss, yes.
The person that makes everything happen. Well, as you know, I saw you guys last week out at your offices. I was very impressed. Some nice digs you've got out there, and I can see why the team is happy and engaged. Last time we got together, Victor, you were sort of lamenting on maybe a bit of a misread April Fool's Day joke, which
it's okay to joke about it now.
Okay. Yeah.
But then I was fearing for my life going back into the office for a couple of days. But now I think I can safely go back to the office.
So there's no traps set in your office. There's no.
You
haven't started the practical joke type
one
thing.
One cannot be too careful.
Okay.
Right.
Did you have many clients actually come and visit you out at your office? And you got a big seminar room there, which was pretty cool.
Yes. So we use that for client education and people that are about to engage us. But we do most of our stuff in the digital world with Zoom. We find it a whole lot more efficient, than the clients don't have to take time off work, and they can be two different locations.
Yeah.
If it's a husband and wife, and it still works.
So someone different locations dialing, and imagine your client base has probably opened up quite a lot outside of just back in the good old days, New South Wales, where you were sort of accessible and you could face to face, but now it's irrelevant.
Yeah. We did have overseas clients and interstate clients as well, but the mainstay was New South Wales. But then certainly that's changing. We have clients from all over the world.
What sort of interstate? Like London, New York?
London, New York. You've got
Asia.
Dubai, all of these
Singapore.
areas. Singapore. Yeah. So a lot of people that are citizens of Australia that have been living abroad, and now they're thinking of at some point in time I'll be coming back to Australia, call it home again. And so we need to build up a nest egg. So, we do help them out. Obviously, lending's a bit of a issue, but we've got some specialists that we've formed alliances with that specialize just on expats.
So we don't really talk about expat investing too much on this show, but it is a cohort of your client base. So they're out there probably generating tax favourable income right now. Dubai, for example, I don't think you pay a lot of tax or any tax at all. So everything you earn, you keep. And for some reason, they still manage to keep advancing, moving forward without the sort of hand in the pocket of the worker. But so not that many people I know buying cash. So there is ways around lending.
Yeah. So
you can be based in Dubai, but buying property here.
Absolutely. I think the key is that you have to be an Australian citizen to begin with, and you get generally 60% to 70%. In good lending climates, you even get 80%, but not your 90s.
And mainstream banks or other banks?
Mainstream banks, and there'd also be specialist lenders that have a niche market that just caters for these types of people as well.
Okay, all right. Well, as you all know, this is our special series on Design Your Decade, which we kicked off in January, and we did a big sort of introduction around it in December of 2024. You can go back, and if you just found this, go and tune in and you work out all the reasons why we're doing this particular discussion, this special series around Design Your Decade. And Reshmi, remind us why designing a decade is important.
Oh my gosh. It
Put
is
you on the
very
spot.
important. Yes, I'm falling asleep actually.
It is. We're recording 4 o'clock. I've just drank 2 cans of cold coffee, so I'm probably okay. Maybe should have fortified with a beer. It might be easier, but Design Your Decade.
10 years, let's say, it's a long time and a lot can happen, and it's a good time to focus to building your portfolio. And a lot can happen if you've structured your portfolio designing strategies well. You can see good results within the 10 years. And so we're trying to streamline it as much as possible so you can get good results within the 10 years.
So 10 years, most people, what do they say, underestimate? They overestimate what they can achieve in a year, and they underestimate in 10 years. Is that right?
Yeah, it is right.
Yeah.
And that is true, right? So if you look at if you're starting, say, an employment career, right, and let's say you're a decade into your career, if you look back, you'd have sort of think, okay, year one, I'm going to do all these things, but then it sort of does fall a bit flat in the face. But then as you progress, you're actually advancing substantially in your career, substantially in your income, and you might have a couple of career changes as well, right? Which ties back into the portfolio as well, because what you start out with might not be where you are really ending in terms of the types of properties in a portfolio, in terms of where you've bought, how you've bought, what entities you've used, what regularity you've used to buy these properties. They all tie back in. And when we brought up the concept of design your decade, it is actually a rolling decade where we are taking into account life. We are taking into account where the property market is. We are taking into account the hiatuses you have in income, the hiatuses you have in the ability to borrow. And when you fold all of that in together, it does give you a quasi plan of acquisitions, years that we will not acquire, and other years where you're going hell bent for leather because the bank's absolutely loving you that in those couple of years.
And this is the point around this fifth instalment of our Design Your Decade special series is about age-appropriate investing. And age is a state of mind, but it's probably, when it comes to property investing, it's contingent to when you start or when you choose to stop and what the market is doing at any point in time. So that's going to shape our discussion today, but I have some news for you both.
You coming out?
Not right now. The Reshmi's Property Investing Insights is the second most popular podcast on the Property Investment Podcast Network.
Well, who would have thought, right?
Who would have thought? After the Smart Property Investment Show, obviously my podcast, which I do.
It's rigged. It's rigged.
It's absolutely rigged.
I think Property Investing Insights is the best one.
But yeah, I do enjoy it, and this has been our longest running sort of co-produced podcast that we do on the network. But what I think has got something to do with it is that I think we're probably resonating more with our female listeners, and I'm very conscious that and despite our best efforts, it sort of still transitions back into it, the Smart Property Investment Show and all the other stuff. It's very male-dominated. For some reason, the voices that you have in and around property tend to be sort of white middle-aged men, guys like myself, not that capable, but it's the big cohort of the voices. So I think, Reshmi, you coming in and as an anchor on Property Investing Insights has been a great asset. So
awesome.
That's a shout out to all our female listeners there. It sounds like it's resonating. We want more females. We were speaking about this the other day. We want to see more females in and around property commentary, because it can be dominated by blokes who have a particular view and way of doing stuff. So
I think
thank
it's
you for your
changing.
input.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah, that's very good. But when it comes to Design Your Decade, specifically sort of investing at the right time, a lot of it will be driven, and we've spoken about this beforehand, on decision making, and most people invest in a syndicate in property.
They do.
That syndicate is the partner that you have, irrespective of what your version of a partner is, and what the legal status is of your partnership. It's a very vibrant and diverse ecosystem that we live within, but most people will invest with someone else. So that construct of your shared collective decision-making, capital allocation, everything connected with it is pretty key. But when you look at age-appropriate investing, sometimes those ages can be different. Sometimes the age at which you start might not necessarily be when you wanted to start. Sometimes the age of when you are forced to finish is different. Different stuff happens at different ages. It's called life, Victor.
That's it.
So how do you sort of give a frame of reference? Is there a simple construct for people to understand what you should be doing at the right age? And let's talk about age being a number at the moment. When's the best time to start investing?
As soon as you can, right? And I know that sounds very canned, but that's the reality, right? The longer you have time in the market, provided you've bought the right assets, the more rewarding it is, and the better platform you have then to launch into bigger and better things down the track. So if you look at it from a historical point of view, and if someone's bought, say, properties 20 years ago, well, let's take us as an example, right? We've bought properties when we were, 27? So I was 27. we bought a house, 3-bedroom house out near Camden, New South Wales, and we paid $137,000 for that house. The house was probably about 12 years old at that time, small block, and if I had not bought that, and let's say I was earning an ordinary income and I was not very, very methodical in how to invest and how to acquire properties, and if I jumped into the market, say, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years' time, I'd be paying 3 times that, if not more, if I were to jump in the market at that point in time. So it's really important that we try and get into the market as soon as possible and not be so consumed about getting it 100% right.
Yeah.
Because time is a very forgiving factor. Yeah. And then equally importantly, we really need to be looking at it from a viewpoint of, okay, whilst we're investing, we still don't want it to be life consuming. So lifestyle is still in the forefront, investing in the background. If you tuck 1 or 2 away in the early years, you're going to do really well down the track.
It is a bit sort of glib. When's the best time to start investing? As early as you can. But I don't want people to beat themselves up around it. And sort of back to some of the surveying we've been doing of the cohort of people that tune into this. Most people start investing in their 40s and their 50s.
They do. And not everyone is thinking around investing in their 20s. So there would be only a certain type of people who think about investing in their 20s. Most young people are about, you've started working, there's a career, I'm going to enjoy myself, I've started to see some money, and that's what they do. They want to go out on holidays, enjoy their life. Realities of life don't hit till much later. And that's the part when you come into your mid years of life, let's say in your 40s, 50s, that's when you realize that you need to do something, because it is all coming to you now that I need to do something for my future. But when you're younger, you don't think about that. You want to enjoy life. And this is the difference if you did something. So let's say if you were to start at 20 or 25 and you didn't, for example, because something else is happening in your life. You're enjoying the other things are priority. And you're not thinking about that. But if you start thinking at 40, and then when you look back, you thought, oh, shit, if I could have done something better, I could have.
And every single person that starts investing, they go, why didn't I do this earlier? Yeah. I could have done it sooner.
In your 20s and your 30s, if you just bought one property a year, in your 20s, you buy one. In your 30s, you buy one, let's say. And then you really come to your 40s and 50s, you already got at least 2 properties which would have grown.
Have a lot of equity in there.
And then you can go dynamic.
And you sort of, that's when you get that nice intersection of you have equity, but you're probably entering or in your peak earning years as well, right?
Absolutely.
You can actually, the utility of that equity can go a long way because you're borrowing clout and power.
It's like you're planting a seed. You just plant it in your 20s, buy the property, that's your seed, you've planted it. Maybe in your 30s, maybe just buy one and plant it, because a lot of other things are happening in life, and as long as that is not impacting on your cash flow, if you maintain it, forget about it, it's there, it'll grow. When you come to your peak earning years and when you start thinking about doing something, then you've got something to fall back on. You're not scraping for deposit, you've got something there.
Yeah, usually you find that in your late 30s, mid 40s, you've got a catalyst coming into the decision making. Could be a partner, could be that now you've finally got the promotion, or it could be that you're starting to have kids, right? So now you're starting to think, okay, I really need to create a nest egg. And so that's when most people jump into property investing. Now, of course, with podcasts like this, people are starting earlier and earlier, and the amount of information that's out there, they're starting earlier as well. But we need to be starting with the end clearly in mind as to where is this ending, and there's no big no in not selling down properties, right? So we need to be really looking at each property as, okay, this is the purpose, this is what I'm going to utilize this for. Perhaps I'm doing the initial hard slog of the 9 to 5, and then at some point in time, I'm going to sell down the properties. I'm going to go on that big holiday, and then I'm going to come back. I'll do another course, repurpose my skill set, and launch myself again in the employment world. So all of those things we can really look at and say, okay, how can we make that happen without having to be forced to scrimp and save? Now, the other side of it, of course, is that if you're an avid spender, when you go, you're one of those guys or girls that goes to the pub with the crew, and then you're the person that's always putting their hand in the pocket because you're that way inclined. Perhaps you square away one property, right? And that's forced savings because you need to then come up with the mortgage repayments and whatnot. And of course, it'll grow faster than what you can save.
Yeah, probably largely if you're buying the right stuff, she'll grow much faster than what you can save. And this is the, one sort of frame of reference for age-appropriate investing is how old you are.
Yeah.
And I completely concur with the point around time is a great mechanism for forgiveness. So if you don't get it right, if you don't get it exactly right, largely the market should carry forward. But sort of running in parallel with that is, I guess, the cycle of building wealth through property. And I think you guys would frame it by planning, acquisition and consolidation.
Yeah.
So the easy way to view it, and no doubt, you can do graphs and charts and all this sort of stuff, and maybe you've done that. The less time that you have to invest, the more truncated or tied to that process of planning, acquisition, consolidation takes place.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And that's the beauty of starting earlier. It just means you've got more time. And what you'll find, and we spoke about this last time we got together, which we sort of spoke about the 4Ds. You can be at different cycles at different times all of the time.
Yeah.
And that's the interesting aspect of property, because as things change, you might have the way I frame it, one portfolio which might be in a consolidation phase, but another aspect of your life which could be in the planning phase. That's okay. It's being able to understand that's the tough thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of moving parts to this, and the journey itself continually morphs because there's so many other external and influencing factors, like the availability of finance, like what messaging Trump's giving. That has a big play in the property market here, unfortunately, right? Because people react based on fear without the old adage of you're making 30-year decisions based on 3 minutes worth of news. So we need to take all of those things into account. Now, if you look at a standard history or a standard journey of a person, they're starting, they've gone through university, now they're starting jobs, so they got money coming in, still got HECS debt most likely. They've probably bought the car that they want, so they've still got a little bit of expense with the cars. And now they're thinking of investing, so we put that into the mix as well. So the property does look different, but we're taking a much longer term approach because we've got plenty of time over here. And then naturally, when they meet someone, they would then start going out, more restaurant dinners, more expenses. Then they may start talking about, okay, let's add to this. So they're adding one more property at that time, but then family starts happening, and that impacts serviceability. That impacts how much money is left over, even though they've got now two incomes, because potentially when the family starts, one partner would stay home for a little while to look after bubs, and once that happens, you've got that little gap in between life where they're going from kindergarten to, say, primary school, and it might not be that expensive. Most people would want to put their kids through when they're going to high schools, particularly if they've got a little bit of success behind them in terms of financial success. They would want to put them into private schools. Now, straight away, you're talking 30K per kid, right? And in some cases, much higher. And that impacts serviceability, that impacts your ability to hold more properties, that impacts your ability to actually think clearly in terms of, okay, where's all this money going to come from? My focus is my kids, give them education, right? So there is this lull period in between with most people if they haven't planned this out properly in terms of the decades. And once they hit the age 50, the kids have come out of school, the expenses have reduced, you're at your peak earning capability in most careers, yet the banks are starting to slowly start seeing you as a risk, right? So whilst you're at the peak earning capability, you may not have enough access to equity to use that to launch into more properties, or it could be that the bank's starting to see you as a risky profession, or they're looking at you as Okay, I can't really discriminate you on your age, but what I might do is give you a 20-year loan as opposed to a 30-year loan. So it impacts repayments. So now all of a sudden, the same property that you could have held in age 30 easily, because it's sitting on a 20-year loan, once the interest only period expires, you're now making double the payments, if not more. So it becomes harder to hold the property. So the types of properties would change, which is like the age-appropriate investing where we're talking about. And in the early days, pretty much you're using the market to move the needle. In the later years of life, if you're starting or if you're restarting your portfolio, you're then moving the needle yourself first to give yourself a bit of safety buffer. And then once you've moved the needles, and how would you move the needles? You're buying really, really well. You're buying in shorter cycle markets, so that if you did get the timing wrong, there's enough recovery time there for it to go back to its next peak. You're also helping the property along its way by doing some smart renovations, or perhaps going down the path of doing some really easy foolproof subdivisions where you're actually adding more dwellings to it, right? So you're creating a bit more of the equity piece so that you're not totally reliant on the market being in your favor. And that's more cognizant of a portfolio that's in the later half of your life, as opposed to in the earlier half of your life. It's more, let's tuck this in the background. Let's not tinker with this too much. Let's get the market doing its stuff.
And just listening to that, Victor, it just gives you some sense of the complexity of the decision making that you have. And if you look at those three aspects, planning, acquisition, or consolidation, or you do it in sense of your age, right? Which is the way to do it. If you're in your 20s and your 30s, you've got energy and you have time, but you probably don't have capital, right? But then you get into that middle zone where you've got, say you've started them, but you've got equity, you've got the ability to service debt, but you probably don't have a lot of time physically or energy, and you've also got considerable expenses, and then you sort of go further down where you sort of kids are left home and stuff. You don't have much time left in the market. You're probably still earning good dough, but you compromise on your ability to borrow because the bank don't like you no more. So it sounds like at every stage there's two or three good points and one negative point, and that's the compromise that exists at every stage, and really having the maturity to understand what that is and don't fight it, but use it as a vehicle. But unless you have the right people around you, you're not going to be able to. You're just not going to be able to make this decision making or see it if you don't know. It's unknown unknowns.
No, absolutely. You have to have gone through that to experience it, to know that, okay, next time. But next time is your next life. And how
you don't get another chance.
No, there's no chance again. So it's best to have someone guide you who's been through the different cycles, the many decades. How many decades? Because we look at it like a dials on a platform, like when we used to do our X-ray, and they had the voltmeter and the amp, and so how do we adjust to get the right picture? And these variables in the property cycle of these investing is the same thing. How much of what we, the variables that we can play with to get the right picture. So
a lot of it's connected with knowledge about what to do when, what you should be doing at the right age, appropriate time, and that could be a contract of your time to be able to be in the market and or your age. I was chatting with a couple of tradie mates of mine the other day, young blokes. They're sort of mid to late 20s, and so much of this is conditional to mindset, like absolutely. And some of the discussions, like they sort of know I do a bit in and around property and that, and I think they might have tuned into this podcast. So they always want to talk to me about property, right? And I go, guys, I don't really know a lot. I know how to talk to people about property, but I don't really know a lot myself. But we're just shooting the breeze. And there's so much misconstrued approaches to property investing based on the immediacy of your peer group or the echo chamber that you operate within. And one of these guys, a real good bloke, he's got a partner in that, and her mum's like, you've got to buy a house to live in, put all your money and do this. Like, it's very old. You've got to go come an old-fashioned view towards home ownership in Australia, and because you operate in and around property, you think no one really has those views anymore, but it's still the common view. You know, this idea of property investment is so foreign still as a concept to a lot of people that depending on who you're surrounding yourself with at any point in time, it's really going to craft and shape your decision making. And you might make the wrong decisions, wrong sort of a frame of reference, but at the age appropriate time to be making those wrong decisions. It's probably worse to be making the wrong decisions in age rather than making a decision which might not be perfect. And that's the mindset that you've really got to grapple with.
Absolutely. You know, there's a saying that I heard a long time ago. I forget who said that. It says, you don't have to be great to get started, but you have to get started to be great. Yeah, and that's true for property investing as well, right? Most people want to have all the ducks absolutely lined up and, absolutely consume as much information to the point where they're not really sure what they're doing anymore. To have that perfect launch into property investing, I think if you can start, you start, right? So long as you're taking into account what you're trying to achieve and have just one filter. If this goes wrong, can I sell this off and walk away with my money by doing X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
And as soon as you start looking at the exit strategy first, you won't make those mistakes. I mean, when we talk about property, that's the first question
thing we
ask.
ask.
Yeah, plan for the worst and hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
And that's and if the worst isn't that bad, you go, okay, give it a crack. It's actually a really good filter. That's how I frame most things. What's my out?
Yeah.
Well, what is my out? And property also, unless a lot of people still get it absolutely wrong. They probably don't tune into this property investing insights, and therefore they're probably making the wrong decisions. But if you largely do the basics right in property investment, you've largely got an out, unless there is stuff completely outside of your control, like markets tank or whatnot. But even then, you should be able to.
But the reality here, and if you look at it historically, if markets do tank, right, it lasts for about 18 months, and then it bounces back, and it bounces back far stronger than it had gone down. And that's the nature of the beast. So if you look at it through any phase of market corrections in Australia, that's what it's always done. Now, whether that market correction was man-made, in other words, government-made, so they've created legislation that has tanked the market, think of negative gearing, or whether it is actually through financial constraints, so the GFC would be a good example, or whether it is through constraint of finance, so inability to get loans because the loan structures or the way the banks are looking at giving out loans have changed substantially. When that does correct, it bounces right back up, higher than what it had gone down.
Yeah.
Right, because of that pent-up demand with all of these people that are sitting on the sidelines waiting for that change. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense of once it starts going up in value, everyone then starts jumping in more and more, and the supply and demand quickly makes it go way, way up. Then it does have a little correction as well. So this is where people that have speculated too late because they're waiting for that real social proof, they then get financially hurt because they get on right when the market is almost at its peak. And they have to, depending on which area, they have to wait for quite a while to then see their growth.
So structurally, the market is forgiving for younger people who start investing earlier because they're often capital light. There's only certain markets that they can invest in, and typically those markets are the ones which are more forgiving. Again, I'm generalising, but they're more forgiving because they're probably lower sort of bottom quartile properties where there's a greater appetite for those properties. So just by starting, there is a layer of forgiveness connected with you. You're better off starting younger for all those reasons.
You were talking about the 18-month bouncing back. This is where my thought was having the buffer to carry you through the 18 months. People, you have to have that buffer when you're investing. No matter how good you earn, you always have to have that sort of buffer sitting for you.
And again, it's about putting in perspective the buffer, and we were chatting offline just in relation to how the accessibility of property markets in Australia for first-time buyers is real, and it's very accessible, particularly with some of the possible policy decisions being made at a federal level. But for a young investor, we were chatting about a property that you guys secured for us out in the western suburbs of Sydney. in Mount Druitt that we're selling at the moment probably go for about $340,000. The cost to hold that property, if that's your first investment property. Now, it might not be the ideal property if you want quick, immediate capital growth. However, as a market entrant, the buffer you need in order to sustain that, considering the propensity of being able to keep a renter in there, which would be quite high, it's pretty risk averse, that decision making. But again, it's about taking the plunge to actually buy that at the right time in your life. That's the age appropriate investment.
Absolutely.
For someone of that age.
Yes. So how long have you held this property for?
We've had that since
12 years now.
Be 12 years or so.
So it was a good entry point for you for at that time. And
Yeah.
now the way things are in the market, it is still a very good entry point for someone of...
It's the right property. It's just not right for me.
Yeah.
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 It's not age appropriate.
Yeah, that's right. And you raised something else over here, right? So as you go through this journey, there will be times where we would offload properties because they're now no longer fitting into the bigger picture. They're more of an inconvenience than a asset when you compare the other assets that you've accumulated. Still a very good asset, still a good starting point. But sometimes you gotta, when you buy a car, right, you start off with whatever you can afford, and then as your earning capability goes up, you're then upgrading your car.
Yeah.
No different in properties, right? You're upgrading the types of properties within your portfolio, but you're also utilizing the ones that we held in the early stages to reduce the debt on the overall portfolio. So it's really important to understand that when you're buying properties, there will be some level of sell down, right? The four-letter dirty word that most people don't talk about in property investing is sell, right? There is some sell at some point in time in a portfolio, whether it's right in the end where you're actually reducing debt, whether it is in the middle phases where you're reducing pressure. So you've started family, you started to start feeling the pressure because the kids are now at high school. You need to come up with a 30, 40, 50K in private school, or you're really feeling that pinch at that point in time. Offload one or two properties. Now, of course, you've got to talk to your accountant first. Make sure you make a financial decision on it based on the tax implications of you selling it. I always and we've always had this philosophy that we are investing for comfort in life, and if comfort in life means that we offload one or two assets to ease the pressure and get more comfortable, and then come back to investing at some point in time, so be it.
Yeah, you need to have that mechanism to shape your decision making, and you don't. Again, age appropriate investing. If you're younger, your appetite and your layers of sort of complexities of your life means that you're probably a lot more resilient, because if something goes wrong, it impacts one person rather than many people. But I take the point around comfort. You need to be comfortable.
Yeah, it's the tool. You have to look at property as a tool. That's all it is. And what is that tool going to do for you for that point in time? And whether it's the right thing or right property to buy or the right property to sell, that's also a thing. Which one do you sell at that time?
Yeah.
But again, the planning aspect of it, and planning isn't, I'm going to plan to be a property investor and then I'm going to go and buy all these properties. There's different aspects of planning. There's the acquisition pathway. What do you buy? Where do you buy it? When do you buy it? And what's the purpose of it? But there's also the planning connected with the point you said, selling it. You can't just go, I'm going to sell something. Like to actually plan for the effective sale of a property investment can take 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. Like sometimes you need to be planning in the sale, because that will probably shape and change your acquisition pathway and the structure you buy within and all that sort of stuff. Don't overlook that.
Yeah, I agree. And in terms of selling properties, right? I've got a little anecdote which I had with a client. They came in for a review and they had spoken with the accountant, and the plan was that they'd sell their current principal place of residence to then pay down the new principal of residence that they've bought. And I had a look at their portfolio, and the plan we rehashed was more down the path of, okay, let's sell a few of the properties that are more at the higher end of the market. So in terms of cycle, so more closer to the 12 o'clock, the peak of the market. this is a client that's based in New South Wales, so let's hold on to the current principal place of residence. We bought the new one and give it another 2-3 years, because our market in New South Wales, in Sydney, where that particular property was in that suburb, was on a strong upward trajectory. And with careful planning, we can still mitigate the capital gains tax, because we've literally got, again, talk to your accountant, but literally got 2 years, maybe 3 years to play around with this scenario. So we then changed the plan. We sold a few of the investment properties to ease the debt pressure a little bit. And from memory, I think we decided on selling down 2 of the units in another state. And we're now planning to hold on to this property for another 2 years before we come back and look at selling down. So we'll be then gaining further capital when we're selling.
So
it,
they're
right?
staying in the principal place of residence.
So they'll rent this current principal place of residence out, and they'll live in the new principal place of residence.
Okay.
There is a bit of nuance in there in around how tax is treated, but we're then not losing that inevitable growth spurt that Sydney will have, particularly that suburb, within the next 18 months. And it's all predictable. The data lines up, the momentum.
Which area of Sydney? You don't have to give me a suburb, but can you give me a basic geographic area?
It's the northern beaches.
Okay.
Yeah. So as you can attest, that market's going pretty strong.
Basically, without the knowledge of the property, what the property was doing or the market's doing in that area, he would have sold that property without making the further gains, if he just held on to it for another couple of years.
Yeah. So the accountant didn't give them wrong advice. They gave them true taxation advice, right? Whereas we're looking at market and looking at, okay, what if we held this and not focus totally on tax? Can we defer this and get more coin out of this?
And this is why you need a good accountant, because they'll be sitting there thinking, well, if I turn my principal place of residence into an investment property, then I sell said investment property, I've got to pay capital gains tax, but your accountant will work out exactly the bit that you actually pay their CGT on.
Yeah.
Because if you've lived there for 20 years and then it's an investment property for 2 years, you're not going to pay, from what I understand, capital gains tax on that whole, but it's be the period it was in that transitionary phase, right?
Correct.
So what you're talking about there is generating a lot more equity or income, of the equity, capital value, versus the offset of what that tax would be.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then moving into a new tax-effective, capital gains tax-free. And a lot of people I know just trade principal places of residences, right? Like, it's, for many people, it's again, there's some negatives with it from a taxation point of view, and there's 7-year rules and 9-year, I can't remember what they are. But you need that tactical application of it, and the view of like keeping the expensive property and selling down the cheaper places elsewhere. That's sensible. How old were these people?
They were in their 50s from memory.
Okay. Age appropriate. Age appropriate.
Yeah.
Sort of tactical.
Yeah,
thing
because
to do
you
at
want
that
to
time.
get when you get to your principal place of residence, you want minimal debt, right? So if it means that we're waiting 18 months, 24 months to get to that minimal debt, by easing the pressure of selling down 1 or 2 investment properties that aren't giving that same payload that you would sell the current principal place of residence right now, but it's easing the pressure and allowing you to hold on to things with the clear intent that this is going to go up. And then if the market didn't go up, there were other things that we could do with that property to force the value up anyway, right? So there was a lot of surety in it.
Yeah.
So again, it's age appropriate investing. It's really age appropriate strategy, age appropriate execution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
depending on where you are in that journey and that sort of life cycle of investing. How late is too late, Reshmi? How late is too late to start investing, do you think?
Late 50s, I think. I don't know,
No,
60s.
maybe 60, 65. Yeah,
It's too late, is it?
It's sort of too late. Yeah.
Because you don't want to be now focusing on something and taking on the stress of the debt and all the rest of it. Firstly, the loans, you won't be getting much. Like as Victor said, the time frames for the loans.
I'd be surprised, because I was listening to something the other day and they were saying pretty much younger people, say in their 20s today, this concept of retiring at 65, they go like, just be very, very careful what you think retirement's going to look like. And retirement, to be fair, is only a relatively new thing, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, most people died before they retired back in the day. But now they're saying, if you think you're going to stop working at 65 and you're going to live to your 85 or 90, what are you going to do for those 30 years? You're not going to have enough time to manufacture the wealth you need
Absolutely.
in order to have that time there. So the fact that 65 now is seen as retirement age, and banks will make their lending assessment based on that as inverted commas a retirement age. When people start retiring at 70, 75, 80, loan terms will start changing.
It will.
Quite a lot. And
You
we're still
want to
some
have
way away
everything
from it.
sorted by the time you retire. Like you have, it's not like you investing right now, working very hard and stressing yourself to enjoy the fruits of your labor in those later years. Investing and enjoying your lifestyle at the same time. And then when you come to retirement, you can still enjoy and even far better. So you're not trying to restrict your lifestyle by investing. That can happen in the background, as we said. And again, according to the age you're in, the types of properties you select, that just helps.
I would imagine also, Victor, maybe you can give some, or Reshmi, you can give a view to this. There's most people that invest in property. I don't know if retirement is a binary thing.
No.
It's not like you're working and then you stop working. It's like, I think a lot of people, if you're a property investor, you start working and then, retirement being a mechanism for maybe framing how you are going to deploy the cycle of planning, acquisition and consolidation. But how many people do you think just stop working these days if they're an active property investor? They're probably at
You
it all the
can't.
time.
You lose your structure, right, when you
Yeah.
retire, unless you've got some really finite things you want to do in retirement, inverted commas, right? You tend to lose your structure, and that's where your health starts spiraling down and all that. And the reality of it is that with the advent of AI, and I'm an avid listener to podcasts, right? So if you look at how things are changing, the information is doubling every 72 days at the moment thanks to AI, and particularly so in the longevity sphere and health sphere. And so the reality of it is that we will, provided you don't die in the next 5 years, we will start having all of these measures that will keep us alive a whole lot longer. So now more than ever, we need to be really looking at where retirement is and how can we cater for us in terms of retirement. We've got obviously a much faster aging population than new babies and new, younger people coming in. We've got governments that are trying to come in and they are trying to, without showing the true economic sense, saying we'll cut down immigration, right? We need the immigration to keep the population younger, to pay tax to cater for the older people, right? So you, sir, obviously. And when you look at all of these things, and the fact that people are more focused on how many properties I own and where I'm buying, the tilt needs to be definitely more towards how much income am I generating, safe passive income am I generating from my portfolio. That's where the tilt needs to be.
Yeah.
I just look at it like this. I always say, for any woman, from my perspective, right? Like I had stopped working. I wasn't. But then what am I going to do at home? So any woman, by the time she's 35, can be financially independent. Absolutely. Now you start in your 20s, and give it a good 10 years. And your life is only pretty much starting in your 30s, right? And by the time, if you've got enough income coming through your portfolio, you don't necessarily have to go and work and give your time to a profession unless you love it and you can do it, which is great, or you can go do part-time. But you've got options opening up in your life. You can go and follow your passion, start a business, do whatever else you like, because the working years, if you focused good between 25 to 35, you've built that. This is the design your decade. Again, from a woman's perspective, I always say to women, young women, I see them as like, okay, just do this in 10 years' time. This is where you would be. I have done it. My results are there. So when we didn't know much and we did it, yes, the prices were low, but it was equally harder to get the loans. But it's the same.
It makes logical sense, like absolutely logical sense. However, what I would say to that is and maybe because I just don't receive this sort of information because it's not within my sphere of sort of influence, but you would be led to believe that that's impossible. Like no one, like I've never heard anyone.
No,
no one's
people
talking about
don't.
this. No one's saying to young females, you go to university, you finish university at 21, 22, you might go and mess around and live in London for a couple of years or go backpack and do whatever you want. You start working professionally at 25. So between 25 and 35,
Absolutely.
typically and I'm absolutely generalising here, I don't want to cop any flack around this, but most of the information that females are consuming and or what is being put out into the ether is not about you can be financially free in 10 years by doing X, Y, Z.
No.
It's normally all the other stuff they're getting told. And even in the workplace, you don't, it's not a currency. Why isn't it a currency that's what, like when females go to the pub or the bar or whatever your version of that is, are they sitting around talking about this stuff? Like, I don't know, I'm asking you.
No.
I don't know.
No, I do my workshops and all the rest of it, but it's only a certain number of females who mostly people kind of leave it to their husbands or spouse, partner.
How do we change
It's
this?
just,
Because I'll be absolutely. I've got girls. I'll be encouraging like I wouldn't believe. But it's just not sort of currency of. Like maybe because it's not seen to be important. I don't know. But
may not
about being
seem-
fine.
yeah.
Finally, you're talking about how, and this is about age appropriate investing. If you're 25, 35, female, you can use that time, double down, and you can either be financially free independently, or you can be financially free and a great contributor to a relationship, whatever your version of that is.
Yeah.
Right? What a great thing.
Yeah.
Well, what an absolute great thing. But maybe people think, well, if I spend all my time doing that, how do I go about dovetailing that with having children and all this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, there's a compromise somewhere.
I think as especially if you, let's say you're in a partnership early in life, right? That's one of the things you need to work towards is to say replace one person's income or replace a portion of the income so that they actually can stay back home to look after kids, right? And that if that's the first milestone, so be it, right? Because what we try and do in investing is this all, holy grail of I want to retire or I want to be financially free. Let's drill it down to milestones. If the first milestone is, okay, I need to have enough equity behind me or enough cash flow behind me to not feel the pinch if when I'm on maternity or paternity leave to have stopped working. And once the government benefits have stopped, I can still continue to be at home to look after the kids, right? So give it good 5 years as an example, right? So
It's all planned.
it's all planned.
But again, it's choice. You might want to be in a workplace as a female and you're driven professionally. Like that's, it's largely irrelevant what you want to do with the optionality of.
But it's the choice.
It's the
It's
choice.
the choice. The fact that
And-
you have the privilege to choose, right? And you whatever you want to do, you can do, right?
The
Yes.
thing is, you've got to still think of, I'm earning all this money now. When I stop working, where's my income coming from? And if I'm used to this lifestyle, where's this income coming from then? And so that's the hard part. You've got to decide.
And this is the challenge also because, some of the complexities of this, because back to my original point, and again, I'm generalising, but most people invest in a syndicate. Normally two people invest in together. They buy a principal place residence together, whatever your version of relationship is. But let's look at a very traditional relationship, a man and a woman. And I don't intend to offend anyone here. I'm just being really, really simple. You've got two people who have different age-appropriate needs at a particular time, although they would have a common purpose, I would think, and intent and strategy, right? So you've got to balance, Reshmi, the needs of the
Absolutely.
individuals collectively to prepare for what is a big unknown, and that is what's your family life going to look like, when are you going to retire, where are you going to live, what other things are going to be thrown up at you, what's your expectations of what you're going to get out of life, and isn't it nice that you don't know what they are? However, property really is the engine
to get you there.
To
to get you there,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
See, one of the things we did as a couple very early in the piece is when we attended the Anthony Robbins seminar, we sat down and we mapped out both our goals, independent goals, right? Then we put them together and said, well, I can support with this, you can support with this. And very soon it became our goal, not an individual goal.
Yeah, it's
right?
good.
So she had the buy-in from me, I had the buy-in from her in terms of what we're trying to achieve, right? So that's what a true partnership should look like, right? You're not just partners in life, you have financial partners as well.
Yeah.
And it comes back to goals, right? Now, one of the things that we didn't quite touch on when we were looking at the investing cycle, so when you were in the middle years where you've got kids now and you can't borrow anymore, that doesn't mean that you actually stop investing. You could come back to some of the properties and build your secondary dwellings if they've been bought for that purpose. If you have enough balance in your industry funds, in your superannuation, you could speak to the right professionals and start a parallel portfolio within your super fund, right? So whilst there's no purchasing of properties in your personal under your personal control, we can certainly build a portfolio in a super fund.
And that's a well-worn path. That you see it
Absolutely.
in their 40s and 50s who are mid-career, midlife, teenage kids. In that, this is that period of time where you don't get a lot of time,
Yes.
right? And often energy as well, because it's normally taken up elsewhere.
There's a
But
lot
that's when
happening.
you've got the money coming in, right?
Yeah.
So that's when your life is the most expensive.
That's right.
Just in general. So, but I'll take your point around. I guess you call it open planning, right? Like you want to be doing this if you're on this pathway journey with someone else, and property is the vehicle to create the life that you need. Open planning is absolutely critical.
It is.
Like it's and it should be enjoyable. You know, if you're not able to open plan and actually say, well, here's my objectives, your objectives, shared objectives, that should shape your shared objectives. And if you don't have buy-in on both sides of the coin, it's going to be very hard to do this. Then it's no investing, not just age-appropriate investing.
That's it.
But complicated.
And remember, it's not a lot of properties you've got to buy, you know.
This is the point also.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know.
So 5, 6, 7 properties.
If
That's a lot.
If
That's a
that.
lot.
Yeah, okay. Oh, does it look like
Well,
a lot?
no, I'd say that's a lot. That's a lot
For the ordinary
for
person,
most,
yeah.
Yeah.
but it's not a lot for people who are tuning into this podcast.
Yes.
I would
Yeah,
say
yeah.
people tuning into this podcast, they're focused, they've got an objective, they've got awareness. So I would say, and it's a huge generalisation, but property investors that tune in who actively work on their education through podcast education probably own more properties than the 1 to 2 that most people do.
Agree.
They would outperform the market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of people have bought properties, but just because they've got to buy a property. And when you run surveys, even with databases, when we do, a lot of people have just the one property.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's normal.
That's normal. Yeah,
That's
and that's
normal.
okay as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what we're trying to really work through here is that how you can outperform what is normal through property investment and doing the right thing at the right time on the right pathway. And again, you think that young people all over the place are buying investment properties. They're not.
Yeah.
There's only a fraction of a handful
That's
of them. But anyway, it's really good. I think we're sort of
We just scratch the surface.
scratch
this
away.
time
And
again.
no, I think I haven't sort of maybe offended anyone with my generalisations around what.
For
Yeah,
any-
that's why we need you on the podcast, Reshmi, to actually say the stuff
say the stuff that needs to be
without
said.
it going, oh, Phil, mate, you can't say that. Like, you know, and but to be fair, this audience is pretty forgiving because they know the intent is right.
That's
you know,
right,
It's
yeah.
I'm not trying to offend anyone, but
But if you've got any hate mail, it's questions@rightpropertygroup.com.au.
but Reshmi, there's something on this. Like, I want to see, and I'm going to make you into talk more around this. Like, and I'll try to do it. This 25 to 35 cohort of females, even younger, right? Like, you know, get stuck in.
Yeah, a
Can
lot
be
of
done.
women, I think these days a lot of women think about their financial side
It's
of things.
changing.
It's changing.
Yeah,
Changing.
yeah, and it's you know it's great that people can create independence, financial independence through property, and financial independence opens the doors to many, many other independent things.
Oh, I'm telling you, if you get to pursue your passion and you know that, money is not an issue, that's just such a
It's
lovely
enlightening.
feeling.
Yeah. I imagine
It's
that's what most people want to chase, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? And that would change also what your passions are. But,
Yeah.
make passion your paycheck. That's what you do, Victor.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Don't do checks anymore. It's
Don't
all
do checks.
EFT.
No. All right, that's good. So that's our fifth installment of our special Design Your Decade. Last month we spoke about the 4 Ds, which were...
Debt.
Direction.
Diversification. You've got me now.
Direction and
Direction.
defense.
Yeah. It's all there. And defense was an important one.
Yeah.
But just touching on it, the defense bit is exactly what we're talking about. If you're defended, it means you can go and do the other stuff, right?
Of course,
That's absolutely
yes.
critical.
Yep.
And next, what are we going to be talking about?
Well, we'll be honing down right into the investing strategies in terms of mapping all this out. So we've been talking for quite a few months in terms of. So we'll touch onto the different types. There's really only 3 ways to invest, right? Yeah. We'll talk about those and what can go wrong. What are the pros and cons of each avenue? Because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of fluff out there in the market, right? Let's bring it down to real basics.
That's key.
Yeah.
And it's good to speak philosophically about stuff because that will help shape perceptions and attitudes and intent and motivation. Motivation is a really important aspect of this. But you're saying there's basically 3 ways to do this. Like most people are sitting there going, are they just making it more and more complicated, more and more difficult? But we just got to get stuck into it, I reckon.
Yep.
Work out because it can be done.
It can be done.
It's not that hard. We'll show you how. Well, I won't. They will. Easter's just around the corner, which is cool.
Is.
Again, it's time for people to sort of talk about this stuff, do some open planning.
That's it. Yeah.
What's the best way to get in touch with your crew, Victor?
So you can reach out to us on the social media, or you can go to our website. There's a contact me form. Just fill that out, and my staff will be in touch.
And can you say, I want to speak to Reshmi? Is that available?
Potentially, yes. There is a bit of a process to get to that stage.
Yeah.
So, we're then talking strategy as opposed to just shooting the breeze.
Yeah, shooting the breeze is cool, but the rubber's got to hit the road somewhere.
It's
So what we're talking about, the only way to actually make money through investing in property is to actually buy property. Hot tip. rightpropertygroup.com.au. Check it out on social media. I hope you enjoyed that, everyone. Do enjoy catching up with Victor and Reshmi. We do this once a month and we get stuck into it. Again, it's a very popular podcast, so I was really happy to see those numbers come through, which was really, really good. So we'll keep at it. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you again next time. Until then, bye-bye.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.